And Frank Drake is one row ahead of me. Frank, did you hear that? And he says, oh, don't worry about it. The man himself told me to chill out. So I thought maybe my froth was an overreaction. So I alert you that as we proceed this evening, maybe what I consider an egregious affront is perhaps not really in the big picture. Okay? But at least I'm self-aware since that moment with Frank Drake in front of me. By the way, I would confront Jodie Foster on this. And I say, Jodie, you probably call her Miss Foster. This line with the Drake, you realize that the math doesn't square out. And she said, really? Oh, I worked so hard to deliver that line. And then I thought, well, is it really her fault? Because they're screenwriters and she's an actress, and so it's her job to read the lines. Hand it to her. Not to make in situ mathematical adjustments to it. However, then I thought, wait a minute, Jodie Foster, last I checked, she graduated from where? Yale. And I thought, if she's a Yale graduate, surely they have arithmetic at Yale. I'm thinking. Moving on. Close Encounters. This might even be on Netflix. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's just because it's a little long, but it's an interesting exercise. And so they learn that their aliens are going to come communicate, they're going to come and land, basically. And they find out that it's going to land at Devil's Tower, Wyoming. This is the famous monument there. So, a couple of things I want to share with you. First, here's how they find out. Because the aliens have been buzz-cutting us for weeks before this event. That's how we kind of figure out maybe a grand arrival is about, little ships are whizzing by us in anticipation of the arrival of the mothership. Okay, so how do we find this out? Well, there's a teletype. So a teletype is how information used to come out of the computer. That's how it used to happen. So the computer would be here, and you would wire to another machine that would just type information on paper. And then the paper would come out, and then you have paper, and you'd be reading paper. The paper doesn't require batteries or anything. Just so we understand each other here. Okay. So we're sitting here, and the teletype is just hammering away. And there's like 6 pairs of numbers repeated in 2 sets of 3 pairs of numbers. So da-da, 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 and another set of 3, and it just repeats. And I'm looking at these numbers. I remember when I first saw this film, I'm looking at them and I say, I have no idea what those numbers are. Okay? And they're pretty sure it's coming from the aliens because they're not in control of their computer while this is happening. And some clever engineer said, I know what those are. That's longitude and latitude. And so they wrote it down and then they went to a map. And this is before GPS and Google Earth. A physical map. And they looked at it and they found Devil's Tower at those coordinates. So, just to be clear, my first thought was, maybe it is longitude and latitude. Then I said, no, it can't be longitude and latitude. You know why? Because there is no reason in this universe why the aliens would know our longitude and latitude system. Hell, we barely know our own longitude and latitude system. It's in degrees, and it goes from 0, not to 100, but to 90? Oh, where'd that come from? completely arbitrary place. The prime meridian is a political decision. It could have gone through Paris, but no, it went through Greenwich, England, because England was powerful and they had an observatory there. So by international agreement, that's when they begin counting your longitude. Then I thought to myself, if the aliens knew all of that, they could just learn English and say, hey, we're coming down to the left of Devil's Tower. Until 7:30. Am I wrong? Think about it. Then, they know it's a mothership. They know it came from outer space. Outer space. Space. If you came here from space, you don't need runway lights, okay? I remember at the beginning they clicked the big, the knife switch. Runway lights, come on. That's for airplanes. So then the ship comes, it lands, and then the hatch opens. And of course the aliens are littler than us, because if they were bigger than us, we'd be scared with us, okay? So, now something I want to compliment aliens on. Okay? It's pretty clear from this and practically every other rendering of aliens we've ever seen. They exit their craft on a ramp, which means they've been handicap accessible long before we've ever been. We have never seen an alien climbing down a ladder, coming off their flying saucer. It's always the ramp. Give it up for the aliens, for the APA. Thor. Okay, so the original Thor movie, Natalie Portman is on the left of those four. She was an astrophysicist in the film, but that fact is irrelevant to what I'm about to show you. Okay? Let's just back up for a minute. As you know, Thor wields a hammer, a rather blunt instrument, I would say, in modern times. And it's very heavy. No one can pick it up, except for him, and only when he has special powers coursing through him. So I've been intrigued my whole life, how much does that hammer actually weigh? And so I went to see Thor, and there was a little bit of information. I said, yes, I can calculate how much the hammer weighs based on that one phrase. So here is the uttering of that phrase.
Thor, Odin's son, my heir, my firstborn, so long entrusted with the mighty hammer Mjolnir, forged in the heart of a dying star. Its power has no equal, as a weapon to destroy, or as a tool to build.
There it is. Forged in the heart of a dying star. I said yes, and I quickly started doing calculations. So here are some dying star densities. So rather than present this to you in metric units, which this is American Jack, what are we going to do? So, actually, we are far more metric than we would even admit to ourselves. We are inching towards the metric system. No, a couple of things, just so you don't feel that bad. Just hear me out. Our money is metric. It was was metric before England's money was metric. They were still using shillings and whatever other, while all our money was base 10 decimal. Okay, from pennies to dollars on up. So other things, you cannot buy a quart of Pepsi. It is a liter, 2 liters, 3 liters, same with water. So our larger volumes of fluids are metric. Photography has always been metric. 70 millimeter film, 35 millimeter film, 50 millimeter length. Our nutrition labels are metric. How many grams of sugar is in that product? How many grams of salt? How many calories? These are metric units. And one of the last things I thought would ever switch over is engine displacement. It went from cubic inches to liters. Nobody even told us that they were doing that. They just did it. And now we speak fluently in liter displacement of our engines. And so it's slow, but there's some I'm holding on to. I'm not giving up. I'm keeping my dozen eggs. And I'm not renaming the inchworm. And I'm still calling it footage of a film. Footage. What footage did you get? I'm not saying meterage. And I still kind of like my Fahrenheit. Oh, it's in the 30s today. It's in the 40s today. It's in the 50s or 60s. Each of those is a kind of comfort zone that we're tuned to. And in metric, they don't really have that in Celsius. Are you in the upper third of the next 10? I'm sure they're happy with their Celsius. Why am I talking about all this? For no reason. I'm just distracted. Back to a new density that I just made up called thimble density, okay? So, we have a kind of dead star called a white dwarf, and if you take 1 thimble of its material, it will weigh 1 ton. Okay? And it turns out a metric ton is about the same as like an English ton, so we don't have to specify here. So, 1 ton per thimble. And that's pretty heavy, but it's not the heaviest we've got out there. A neutron star is 1 trillion tons per thimble. That is the densest matter we know. And that is the death of a high-mass star. And if I'm going to forge Mjolnir, the name of Thor's hammer, I'm going to do it in the baddest ass star I can possibly find. A neutron star. So, I proceed. And then I tweet about it. So here it is. If Thor's hammer is made of neutron star matter, implied by legend, that it weighs as much as a herd of 30 billion elephants. Now, how do I know how big Thor's hammer is? Thor was kind enough to lend me the hammer so that I could make the proper measurements. Okay, so you think that's a geeky thing to do, don't you? You feel it. I know you're thinking. This guy Tyson is geekier than we ever imagined. But I do not wear the crown of the geeks. That would go to others who walk this earth. Sorry, Neil Tyson, but you're wrong about Thor's hammer. Material scientist, North Carolina State University. Okay, that's Matt on the left, and that's Suveen on the right, holding Captain America's shield. The critical mistake, Tyson Lecture. We are arguing about Thor's hammer. The critical mistake Tyson makes is thinking that Mjolnir was forged of the core of a dying star, when it was actually forged in the core of a dying star. Program manager of the Material Science Division of the U.S. Army.